You smell that? It's awards season. And this year, like every other, Papa Jeff is whipping up a batch of his favorite game awards for us to sink our teeth into, which means two things are inevitable. We can expect the dinner table to erupt in political chaos thanks to Uncle Ron, and another AAA action-adventure game is going to take Game of the Year at the Game Awards. Again. There are countless awards given out to games every year, but chances are the only televised video game award show you're going to be watching with your eyeballs this year are the annual Game Awards. It's exciting to celebrate our favorite creators in the industry and to see them mingle with celebrities that Gen Z probably could not name even if they were face to face with their little friend. Like any other live televised awards show, it all feels oddly performative, doesn't it? A sort of uncanny valley of human interaction between the presenters and the winners. Frankly, I'm not sure Animal has ever played a video game in his entire life. Game poser. Yet, it's hard to turn away when the winners are announced, in part because awards season begins a major discussion in the gaming community every December on the comparative value of games. We can argue and bicker online about which game is best this year, but it never quite feels satisfying. Games touch us in very personal ways. Stop. Don't go there. But it's rarely possible to actually convince someone that their favorite game doesn't deserve Game of the Year. So why do we argue about it? Why do we put ourselves through the pain of watching a jury decide the Game of the Year for us every year? What good do the Game Awards actually do for the greater conversation about what makes a great game? Who's actually making the decisions behind the scenes? And how much weight should we be giving the Game of the Year award when determining our own opinions about games? Well, as it turns out, there's something not so secret behind the Game Awards that most viewers don't actually know. And I think it's going to change the way that you view awards shows, not only for games, but for music, movies, television, and beyond. But first, we should understand why awards shows even exist in the first place, and what is it about them that makes us voyeuristically tune in to gawk at the impractically dressed year after year. Well, lay back in your animuses, because I'm going to have to take you back all the way to 700 BCE. You're a peasant living in Egypt, and you've been invited to an incredible spectacle, the chariot race. Flavius Julius is set off to face Horsey McHorse Race in the Tutankhamun Cash App Arena. Incredible. It's going to be a battle for the ages, and only one will win, though, let's be honest, you're secretly hoping it's Horsey. We, as a species, have been obsessed with competition and the stories of trial and triumph since before the written word was even invented. From ancient myths to Karen's local latest gossip, conflict breaks up our daily monotony. And if we aren't currently experiencing any conflict ourselves, then we can live it vicariously through the stories of others. It's what keeps us flipping pages one after another when reading a good book, or keeps us playing for one more turn in a video game. And beyond its entertainment benefits, conflict provides an opportunity for tribalism and the belonging with others. Whether cheering for a local sports team or siding with one of two protagonists in a book, movie, or game, you know that taking one side means forming a common bond with other people like you. It feels good to be part of a crowd, all rooting for the same outcome, or in siding with a misunderstood protagonist who eventually comes out on top. Conflict also imparts an important human need. Where in most of our lives, reality takes place in this grainy shade of gray, there is something satisfying about a competition that features a winner and a loser, a knowable outcome, a grain of truth. Now, not everyone is big into chariot races, and there are some who can't bring themselves to revel in the blood sport and the literal pitting of slaves against each other in the arena, so we humans devised a new form of competition for nerds, held among the elite in Greece around 500 BCE, the awards show. As if they didn't take credit for nearly every modern invention in our society already. Historians tell us that wealthy Greek patrons would commission stories be written, and would compete against each other in drama festivals to take home various awards, like the award for the best play, or best director, or best actor. Sound familiar? It's crazy to think about, but the history of our modern popularity contest for television, movies, and music and games dates over 2,500 years ago. Fast forward to today, and the Oscars are now the longest running televised award show in history. And much like the American Super Bowl, I would say that the majority of viewers tune in not because they have some personal stake in the winners of the competition, but because it's a moment to allow yourself to be caught up in the spectacle. It's the one time of year when our favorite faces from Hollywood gather together to make a total scene. One long, semi-scripted live episode out of the TV show of our lives. Or rather, their lives. No normies allowed. The Game Awards, like most awards shows, borrows a lot from the Oscars. The publicity walk across the red carpet on the way into the event, broad award categories for nomination. It is held in front of a live audience and broadcasts to you at home. They even play music to encourage speakers to wrap it up if award winners have gone on for a bit too long. Side note here, they might want to reconsider their song choice because the track they played behind Christopher Judge this year was way too epic. I wouldn't have wanted to stop speaking either. But unlike at the Oscars, where nominations and winners are determined by the creators within the industry, the Game Award nominees are determined in a vote between video game critics and media publications. It's an interesting deviation between the two shows that you should pay attention to because it has a major impact on the type of games that get attention at the Game Awards, and in turn, maybe even influence the kinds of games that major publishers are willing to produce. That's because at the end of the night, an awards show needs a king or queen, one game to rule them all, the Game of the Year. It's not enough to recognize games for their direction, their sound design, their music, visuals, accessibility, social impact, the unique and individual elements that make games what they are. No, we need to witness a yearly beatdown of our favorite games at the hands of a corporate-funded Goliath. How can we know who was right or wrong if we don't crown a single victor in the proverbial playground of public opinion? And like the bullies that we are, the Game Awards allows us to get our punch in by casting our votes for the nominees online. So ultimately, we decide the winners. Power to the people. Good old democracy in action, right? Wrong. While you can vote in each of the categories featured at the Game Awards, the public vote only actually accounts for 10% of the final voting score. This may just be a stunt to give participants a feeling that they have a horse in this race, but honestly, thank the God of War that the public vote counts for so little, because let's be honest, the general public is flanking stupid. Y'all good, but like anyone else not watching this, idiots. Spend 2 minutes reading public reviews on Amazon and you'll realize that the general public shouldn't be trusted to vote on anything. Here's a review for Mario and Rabbids Sparks of Hope that we pulled up, where one reviewer says, 1 star, not my cup of tea, simply a battle game. Gian, if you look at the box cover, you'll find that Mario is holding a gun. But fine, give the people their public vote for Game of the Year. One thing the Game Awards has done right is realize that public voting is inherently flawed. Okay, not because they're idiots, that was mean, but rather because there's nothing at stake in voting in a popularity contest. If I were to ask you what your favorite game of the year is, you might name one of the 6 nominated this year at the Game Awards. But if I were to ask you which of these 6 games this year is the best above all others, would you even be able to answer honestly? Have you played all of these games? Chances are you haven't. I haven't even, and it's my job to play games. Instead, if you ask anyone to name the game of the year from the list of nominees, all we individually can offer are our experiences that we've personally enjoyed. This type of vote is largely flawed and perhaps more accurately resembles a game's cultural popularity and its sales appeal, rather than its merits as a great game. This is perhaps one reason why media outlets are asked to confer with their editing staff and submit a single list of their 5 nominees in each of the 31 categories. It's unlikely that any one person, even at IGN, has played all 6 of these games, but when IGN can draw on their entire editorial staff to make a combined decision, their vote for the nominees perhaps is slightly more informed. Now, If I were to look at the previous award winners, there's often a standout winner before the year is even over. But in a year like this past one, I can imagine it is exceedingly difficult to choose a single title for Game of the Year, which probably resonates with anyone who's ever been asked by a friend or loved one to name their favorite game. This has been such a great night. I'm having such a great time. Thank you for dinner. Yeah, I'm having a good time too. Hey, you play video games, right? So what's your favorite game? Yeah, I have a few. BioShock is a classic. The new God of War is really great. The story is absolutely fantastic. Yeah, but which one's your favorite? I don't know. I like them for different reasons. I probably have the most hours in World of Warcraft, but I'm not sure I could call that my favorite anymore, you know? There's a lot of different games out there that... But if you had to choose one... I'm gonna head out. Let's just split the check. Picking one game to win in any of these categories gives me some amount of anxiety. This year I stared at the list of games for Impact, having only played Citizen Sleeper and absolutely falling in love with the game. And I asked myself whether it was fair for me to cast a vote in the category at all. Does Citizen Sleeper have a stronger, more valuable message for society than the other games in the list that I haven't played? I can't say. Casting my vote in the category would only reinforce the issue I mentioned up above, that the public vote acts as more of an indicator of a game's sales numbers, rather than its merit over other games. Am I alone in thinking this way? Should I have cast my vote for Citizen Sleeper despite my reservations? Or maybe should I have scoured forums and Reddit posts on the topic and made my decision based on public opinion? Seeing the flaws in voting on one game over another has pretty much eroded my faith in the Game Awards in general, as an indication of what makes a good game. My opinion on games used to be, in part, swayed by the awards and the accolades and review scores given to games throughout the year. But lately, I give less and less value to the winner of the Game Awards every year, and that's thanks to a particularly life-changing experience I had a few years ago. I was going through a difficult time in my life back in 2017 when I first found Hollow Knight. I'd been struggling with my identity, questioning who I wanted to be when I grew up, wondering if I was on the right path for myself and my future. And I remember just feeling stuck in a pretty good paying job that I'd chosen over pursuing one in my passion for art or music or games. Stuck not knowing which path I should take next. Stuck from the anxiety alone, from the number of choices ahead of me. And right then, when I needed it most, I was thrown into a dark, ever-looming world that, in my eyes today, represented the stuckness I was feeling. In this world, I found literal glimmers of hope, difficult trials that I could overcome through ingenuity and new thinking, a moody, powerful, introspective soundtrack that wrapped me up in a cozy little blanket of sound. And I also went to therapy, which, seriously helped. Honestly, I am a therapy stan. Yet, beyond its artistic merits, Hollow Knight changed me, and it changed my perspective on the world around me. It brought me out of that introspective stuckness I was in, and finally beating the game felt like I could take the first breath of fresh air that I had had in a long while. Later that same year, Hollow Knight was nominated by the Game Awards for the Best Debut Indie Game. Finally, there was some public recognition for the game that literally changed my life. And yet, it didn't win. Instead, Cuphead took the prize, and seriously, congratulations to the team. But I was left wondering in that moment, watching the Game Awards move on like nothing had happened. Had I missed something? Should I have tempered my praise for Hollow Knight and what it did for me, to me? Should I have played Cuphead instead? Was I wrong? No. See, valuing games is subjective and messy. I took the decision by the Game Awards kind of personally, and that hurt. But with new eyes, I know now that I don't think anyone can definitively say that one game is truly better than another. And that's what puts me at such contention with awards shows. The award is called Game of the Year, but the award itself doesn't give a game any more value than a game's title does. Sometime between 2017 and today, I realized something important about the Game Awards. Something that has always been true, I just didn't realize it at the time. And that's that the reality is that the Game Awards are not for you. We think of televised content as made for us. We are the consumer, right? The carefully crafted script, the orchestrated camera angles that make us look like we are on stage with Jeff and Animal. We are given a front row seat to the greatest speeches possibly in gaming history. You might feel a sense of affirmation if your favorite game experience or soundtrack this year wins an award, but the awards for games and music and movies are awarded not to make anyone feel good. For an industry that spends every day of the year focused on the enjoyment of the community built around it, the Game Awards are one moment to celebrate the creators in gaming that make it all possible. Now, there is still an issue with this, and if Game Awards shows feel worse and worse every year, it's because the industry recognizes that you aren't a participant of the awards show. You are the product. Let me say up front that advertising at the Game Awards is honestly engrossing. The show tends to make moves in the industry by releasing exclusive footage to the public every year. And while it's hard to get through the Game Awards without at least once rolling your eyes at some awkward moment or misplaced ad, for the most part, the show does a great job of treating you with respect as you watch a bunch of advertisements. The awards themselves shine a spotlight on some of the greatest games of the year, and in turn, that attention tends to positively affect sales. Giving a Steam Deck away once a minute is a major publicity stunt designed to sell more Steam Decks. Crazy, I know. And I hate to break it to you, but Animal didn't just show up. His agent negotiated a lengthy paid contract, including screen time and a comfy front row seat in exchange for minimal screaming. It's nothing to be upset about, really. It's just a fact of televised content. The money needs to come from somewhere, and the Game Awards survives due to sponsors that purchase advertisement on the show itself. I feel like this topic tends to make me sound a little bit more cynical than I really am, so let's move on to the good that the Game Awards does for the industry. The game-focused categories awarded at the Game Awards can be split into two buckets, roughly. Awards that celebrate the best game in a genre, and awards that celebrate the hidden effort behind games, like community support, accessibility, and audio design. When judging games, I find it easier, and far fairer, honestly, to break them down into their parts and compare individual elements of games to one another, rather than taking a game as a whole and smashing it up against another. Take audio design, for example. What you hear in a game is so important in how games immerse us in their worlds. Do your footsteps sound different when crunching through dry leaves versus when walking down a stone hallway? What does it sound like to bury a hatchet into the side of a tree? It's far more objective to identify lackluster sound design than it is to identify a better or worse game as a whole. I called sound design out here specifically because it's an area of game design that I am obsessed with. So keep an eye out on the channel here for a video about it sometime in the future. But this level of recognition for the teams within teams behind our favorite games is one of the highlights of the Game Awards for me, and I want to see more of it. Aside from highlighting the people that work on games, the Game Awards has the power to also act as a force for good by highlighting games with a social mission. The awards for innovation in accessibility and games for impact go beyond awarding a team for a job well done. More, they shine a spotlight on how games affect our society. Hollow Knight is just one example of a game that has changed my life for the better, but there are many others. Video games are the new Aesop's Fables. They can portray important human messages and morals, and have the honest power to change lives. The Game Awards didn't have to include these categories, but doing so emphasizes how digital art can transcend its digital existence. It's an important and inspiring message not only for the winners of the awards, but for future game designers and writers, and I am here for it. But a majority of the Game Awards fall into that first bucket I mentioned, games that stand out as the best in their given genre. It is a difficult task, so how do we fairly compare games to one another in their entirety? And what factors tie into this massive decision every year? Honestly, I don't envy the juries responsible for this, especially in a year where we have two gigantic games going up against one another. But using 2017 as an example, we can analyze why Cuphead may have won over Hollow Knight. If we look purely at Steam reviews, we can see that Hollow Knight now has more than double the positive reviews of Cuphead. This might lead you to think that Cuphead is, dare I say it, the worse game. But if I were to take a stab at the reasons why it won, I would say that its playful appearance was more inviting than Hollow Knight's dour setting. It breathes an incredibly vibrant and unique visual design and soundtrack that ultimately inspired an entire children's show on Netflix. It features simpler controls and movement, it's easier to pick up and put down, there's an optional co-op mode, which means more people could play it together with friends or family, and it was championed by Microsoft as an Xbox and PC exclusive at the time, which shined a spotlight on the game over its darker, gloomier brother. There's a lot of spotlights going on in this metaphor. Cuphead was the more widely approachable game, and that creates an easier argument for it to win. I'm just not convinced that it's truly a better game than Hollow Knight is. Would Hollow Knight have won if it were released in a different year? Perhaps, but the reality is that judging one game's value over another, especially in the period of only 12 months, is an ultimately imperfect process. There are, of course, objective guides that we can use to make judgments of games. A game's performance can completely rule it out from contention, perhaps, but games are imperfect objects, and sometimes even in their imperfection, we can find joy, even perfect experiences. The Pokemon series is a great example of this. Despite its wide acclaim, the Pokemon games have been peppered with issues since all the way back to Red and Blue. Most recently though, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, which I think were some of the best mainline Pokemon games released in years. They were plagued by frustrating performance issues and lackluster graphics, even when compared to the recent Switch release of Sword and Shield. Despite the performance issues, the games are well written for both kids and adults. The world is fun to travel, and the music, my god, the music is outstanding. Fortunately, the performance issues alone were enough to disqualify the game from snagging an award, but add to the mix that Scarlet and Violet were released literally hours before the Game Awards cut off for game releases this award season, and Pokemon didn't stand a chance against its competitors. That leads to another important factor when we compare games to each other each year: time. Objectivity when comparing games to one another is threatened by a major human issue known as recency bias. Recency bias is our tendency to remember recent events more strongly than the events that have happened in the past. We're more likely to have strong opinions and memories about the games that we played most recently, and this can considerably warp our perceptions about games throughout the year. If your list of favorite games has ever changed to include a game you more recently played, you may have fallen victim to the effects of recency bias yourself. The games you played in the past aren't necessarily worse than the games you played today. But this is especially an issue in the context of awards shows that compare games to one another only that are released in the same 12-month time span. I'm sitting down to compare Elden Ring, which I played back in February of 2022, and God of War Ragnarok, which released much more recently. Ragnarok features a gorgeous, dynamic soundtrack, a diverse cast of unique characters, each brought to life by incredible voice actors, some amazing accessibility options that are building the way forward for accessibility in video games, especially on a platform that has only recently announced its first-party accessibility controller, and the return to the beautiful locales across the 9 realms. This isn't mentioned in the game's tight controls that make combat as Kratos and Atreus just feel so good. Plus, when a game manages to jerk real emotions from me while playing, beyond just cheap shock or surprise, I see that as a true feat of storytelling and character development, and Ragnarok hits that right on the head with its brilliant, poignant, linear narrative experience that has already made me tear up several times. And while I haven't finished the game yet, I can just tell that its writers are teeing me up for a bumbling, ugly cry at the end of the game. Mom, I swear the tissues on my desk are for playing with the God of War. I mean, playing God of War, please! But how can Ragnarok possibly compare to my experience with Elden Ring, a game that transported me to the lands between? The game's narrative style is unlike anything I have ever experienced, and it completely upended my expectations of how games should portray their stories. The lands between are full of near imperceptible clues that betray its secrets, and other players leave behind hints and notes and whatever the hell this is supposed to mean that give the world a presence, that is, a present existence, a nowness, that without them, the world might feel like it was being experienced somehow in the past tense. Elden Ring permits a sort of creativity not seen in many open world games today. Your ability to customize everything from stats to weapons to the armor you bring with you in battle gives you the freedom to tackle the enormous challenges ahead of you, the way that feels best for you. More often than not, the world feels esoteric and unknowable to you. What the hell is this thing, and why does it hate me? Why do these people look like frogs? Can a Tarnish get a maiden around here? Why does this guy eat poop, and who let him into our house?
What the fuck is that?
Oh, who is that creaming their pants in the intro cinematic? Do all dogs go to heaven? Why is my pottery talking to me? Can I go home now? You can play through the game without answering any of these questions, or you can dig in like an obsessive private investigator with a drinking problem and turn over every rock, scour obscure forum posts for leads, make one of those crazy cork boards with the pictures and the push pins and the string until you're sitting alone in your motel room wearing nothing but a soiled loincloth and a large jar over your head. All that to say that Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok are both amazing games in their own right. So how could we possibly pick one? They both feature impressive combat. They both have sprawling worlds with hundreds of secrets to explore. They both offer the player a variety of ways to take down your opponents, and both offer incredibly difficult boss fights for you to overcome. It's noteworthy to bring up that no indie game publisher has ever won Game of the Year at the Game Awards. Looking at the past winners, with very few exceptions, you see a trend that the type of games to win Game of the Year are large, narrative, action-adventure games from a AAA publisher, with a strong emphasis on combat mechanics and a dash of puzzling. Oh, and Overwatch.
Oh, let's break it. Damn!
I think this may be due to the tendency for the Game Awards judging panel, primarily made up of those corporate media companies like IGN and Eurogamer, to focus coverage on AAA titles over indie games. This leads indie publishers to be sequestered into their own category, rarely in contention for and never yet awarded Game of the Year. We've seen a slow shift in the inclusion of indie coverage by major outlets in the past years, but despite the indie game industry's growing popularity, it may never reach the coverage that major outlets give to AAA publishers. Big companies bring big titles, and big titles bring big news. Understanding better now how the Game Awards are determined has dramatically changed my perspective on how much power the title of Game of the Year holds in my opinion of games. There's real societal value in recognizing the amazing accomplishments of the people behind our favorite titles, and that's why the event was created in the first place. That's no secret. But beyond the recognition of the teams who make games possible, there really isn't a point to comparing games to one another this way. Unlike in the Chariot race, there's no true winner or loser when games are compared to one another at the end of the year. A game's subjective value doesn't increase when it wins an award, and its value doesn't decrease if it loses. I'm reminded of Jacob Geller's video, The Future of Writing About Games. I'm spoiling his thesis and the big reveal of the video, sorry Jacob, but he posits that perhaps we should think of the value of games not in the hours we spend playing them, but in the hours that they spend in our memories. Games and art in its many forms, have the ability to ripple out into our real lives and affect us in ways beyond simply the time we spend playing them. And this happens regardless of whether a game wins Game of the Year or is even recognized for an award at all. So don't let the Game Awards or any awards show ruin the experiences that have made you who you are. Keep tuning in. Enjoy the spectacle, enjoy the world first announcements throughout the night, enjoy the increasingly fashionable attendees. Hot damn, I didn't realize nerds were starting to dress so good. And keep rooting for your favorite teams in game development. They need your love and support, win or lose. But let's agree to separate the value we place on games from the words placed inside of an envelope. The Game Awards can be a force for change, just don't let them change your opinion. Hey, it's Max. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't done so already, if you liked what you saw, don't forget to like and subscribe, and also leave a comment down below. Let me know what game in 2022 or whatever year you're watching this really affected you, really left an impact on you. I would love to hear from you all, because at the end of each one of our videos, I would love to be able to respond to a couple of the comments that were left. And there were two that really stuck out. First off, HydroFrog64 said one thing they wanted to add to the discussion was that one of the reasons that they don't get into existing games is the FOMO at the beginning of a game, especially for games like World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV, right? These games have such a huge history. You want to kind of be part of the really big, excited rush at the start of these games. And after a game has gone on for a little while, it kind of feels like you missed out on the really exciting moments. I completely get that. That is so true. And I don't know if there's really a good answer or solution to it, honestly, except for something like Classic WoW, which we saw actually did pretty well, just was a very different experience than it was when the game first released. The other one was from Memento XO, who said that they asked their friend who they used to play games with all the time if they wanted to play games together, and the two of them are super excited to play games. You have no idea how good that feels. Just to hear that that video made such an impact on the two of you. I hope you had an awesome time. I'd love to hear what games you played. Thank you, thank you, thank you for just letting me know, honestly, because otherwise, how would I have ever known that this had reached so many people? On that note, we got so many responses that people loved the video and liked the channel and excited, and were kind of surprised that it had so few subscribers and so few views at the time that it was released. That means the world, honestly. Thank you so freaking much for the unbelievable support, the unimaginable response to our first video. It really, really, really means a lot. If you want to be part of the conversation around games, I will be making a video on Patreon where you can go and join and respond to all of the comments that we have seen on YouTube, more or less all. Not every single one of them, but the ones that have really stood out to us and we have something to say about. So if that interests you, go over to patreon.com/voxelshow and support us there. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.